Hi, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast, episode 105 today. I'm going to be honest with you, we're a little bit behind with our workload this week, and so we haven't prepared a grammar point for you. But no worries, I'm going to jump straight into the emails and comments. We've got lots of those to deal with today. I say deal with like it's a bad thing. They're great. We've got some really good messages this week. So I'm going to start off with Beck by email. Sent a fantastic email, which just really put a smile on my face. Starting off here, Dear Phil and Luke, I started learning Mandarin 2 months ago to cure pandemic boredom, but now I'm fully determined to become fluent in the language. I heard about your method in the beginning when I was doing research on different courses, and the hands and movement method intrigued me. I had begun learning the language on one of the many gamification apps, which was fun in the beginning, but learning characters felt like a chore and trying to write alien symbols. Yeah, I found that a lot as well. It's a lot of these apps. They look so amazing. They're flashy. They give you these nice dopamine hits. They're very gamified, as you say. But in terms of real substance, real progress in the language, it's often missing. I finally cracked down and started paying for. I think you broke down, right? If I cracked down, never heard that one. And started paying for a real course, Chinese for Us, which is one of the best reviewed courses next to your guys. Yeah, that's it's really high quality stuff. They go into such great detail with their explanations, and they're very competent curriculum designers and very good teachers as well. While this course is great, it only goes up to HSK 2 and is a bit slower going because how thorough things are covered. Learning Chinese characters are still taught more in the traditional way, so I still struggled, even though I had a great foundation from their stroke order course. I eventually got Scritter, which helped out, but I still forgot a lot, and even with some simple mnemonics. Speaking of Scritter, I'm just going to jump in again here. I was chatting to Jake Gill, the CEO of Scritter, recently. Phil and I both had a meeting with him and just seeing how we could possibly work together. And although I don't think he'll be the app will be a replacement for Anki at this point, because it just doesn't quite do everything that Anki does, but we will definitely be creating Mandarin Blueprint Scritter decks that we can use and you'll be able to have access to. So we'll just make all of the characters and all of the individual words that we supply on the course into Scritter decks. I'm not sure how long this will take. We're still in discussions about that. But the one thing that several things that Scritter does really well, actually, but the main thing they do well is they have such a satisfying, addictive writing app that you do with your finger, and it's just, I used it for many hours when I was learning Chinese. It's very, very addictive and very satisfying, and it works. As long as you have a good method to back it up, like, to actually learn the characters and words separately. It's just really fun to review. So that is something that's in the pipeline. Hopefully it wouldn't take more than a few months to sort that out, maybe even a few weeks, let's see. But anyway, just reminded me of that. Saw you mentioned Scritter there. Yes, but Scritter alone, just like Memrise alone, is not, although they're fantastic apps, they do what they do really, really well, you can't use them by themselves, So yes, that's not going to work on their own, even if you do have some mnemonics, some simple mnemonics with them that go alongside with them. Finally, I took the time to read the ebook for the hands and movement method and created a list of the sets, actors, and started to implement the method in the learning of characters. Now, I've learned more characters in the last 2 weeks than the rest of the 2 months combined, going from 0 to well over 140 and counting. While Chinese for Us is a great course, honestly, without Scritter, Pleco, and the hands and movement method, it wouldn't be progressing as fast. So my goal is, once I reach HSK 2, to switch over to Mandarin Blueprint, since I enjoy learning using this method so much. I used to despise writing characters and would rather type, but now it's a fun and enjoyable process to actually do writing practice. Yeah, it's fun because you can actually do it and get it right most of the time with our method. But if you're constantly failing and not writing them correctly, and that's not fun at all. So that's absolutely completely normal. When I first read about the Mandarin Blueprint and the claims of general fluency, or basic fluency rather, in 6 months to a year, I honestly thought you guys were just spewing false advertising and grandiose claims. Yeah, that's understandable. And, even 6 months to a year for basic fluency, that's still a heck of a daily time investment that you'll need, at least 3 hours, in order to achieve that for most people. And most people can't do that, right? And of course, the speaking practice that you need as well. But it is possible. It is possible to get to a very basic level of fluency in that time with our method. Boy, do I think differently now. I'm learning an average of 6 characters a day, which to me I thought may not seem a lot at first until I calculated that could be over 2,000 characters in a year, which blew my mind. Yes, consistency is key. And I think it might be the most important thing about about learning a language or any skill really, is consistency. If you do 10 minutes a day, 1 character a day, still going to get there as long as you consistently do it every day. Thanks so much, guys, for the hard work that went into developing your method. You have boosted my confidence and have made learning Mandarin a fun and enjoyable start to a lifelong journey. 谢谢, Beck. Thanks a lot, Beck. Great email. And I especially like the last line, a lifelong journey. And we do make grandiose claims. We do say, you can do this in 6 months, because no one wants to click or start a free trial of a product that says you'll get to advanced fluency in eventually when question mark time depending on how much it's too long, it's boring, and it doesn't get people's attention at the end of the day. So as long as we say true things that we must get people's attention, it's just a must. It's the only way to get noticed. But we have to say that stuff in order to get people in the door, get a free trial going. Just try the thing. But then once people actually start doing it, they realize eventually that, yeah, you can do such and such in so many weeks or months. But Chinese is a lifelong skill. I've been, I wouldn't say I'm learning Chinese, like studying Chinese for 7 years, but I've been involved with it for 7 years. I wouldn't classify my daily activities with Chinese as studying Chinese, really. It's just a part of my life now. But I'm constantly learning new words, constantly practicing, constantly doing it. And I will be for the rest of my life. I mean, it's not just because I've married a Chinese person and I'm in the culture now for the rest of my life. But it's not just because of that. It's a passion. It turns into a passion for most people, I think. And a lot of people don't realize that, so you've already noticed that, Beck. It's a lifelong journey, yes. And that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that, again, don't listen to that lifelong journey as a phrase and think, oh, that means I have to spend an entire lifetime on it and I'll only get to this level. Don't worry about all that. It's about enjoying the journey. It's not about the destination, because the destination will never come. You will never fully master any language, even your own. So you have to enjoy that journey. I hope that's clear. I felt like I was getting into rambling territory there slightly, but I think I'm all right. So thank you very much for that, Beck. Next is Ric Santos by email. He says, Dear Luke and Phil, thank you for your encouragement and tips about shadowing. Since I get easily tired when talking, more so when there is an effort like voicing out in Chinese, like enunciating the Chinese words. Yes, I pace myself in chunks of 10 minutes. That's perfect. Yeah, I don't know if you're doing that just of your own volition, but we also recommend doing that by using things like time boxing. I'm not sure if that's something that you're doing, but I highly recommend that to everyone, especially for high intensity or boring activities, things that you don't really want to do. Or that you don't really have much energy for, but you have to do them, or things that are very, very energy and time intensive. Small chunks of a few minutes each. Time yourself. Set a timer. When a beeper goes off, you stop doing it and you rest or you do something else. I resist the temptation to rush to the next lesson. I also resist the temptation to memorize sentences because I would forget them soon enough anyway. Correct. Well done. Certain phrases can be good for memorization. Just things like the conversation connectors that we provide. If you just sort of drill those into your brain, those can be good for just general phrases because they're quite common and very useful. But generally, yeah, don't worry about memorizing sentences. The present setup makes use of the SRS, and it takes care of this quite effortlessly. I'm getting familiarized with the words, phrases, in context, and I know I will meet these words again on their due dates. Good. That's patience. It's a fantastic skill to develop when it comes to learning this language. So the first 10 minutes or until I get tired, I shadow the Anki, sentences or dialogues as the cards come up. When tired, I just listen without looking at the screen and find out whether I understood what was said. Fantastic. Really good idea. I press R again for replay to listen. Then I look up and I see what were the words I did not capture correctly. At the same time, I try to understand the recording in the Chinese way. That is, if I understood the message right, the message of what's being said, the real meaning, essentially you could say that's a translation of what's being said. Most of the time, my own translation is not at all good or current English, but if the message is the same, then I'm good. Exactly, yes. Translation is very flexible, let's say. If there are particular words or phrases that are new and strange to me, I replay the recording and focus on the coming word, if the sound of it will get accustomed to my ear. Only then I can say I heard the word. Then I can practice writing them and study the meaning. 以及máfan, 不错, 随手. I find all of them very engaging. My slow progress is perhaps due to my curiosity. When I see a new word like máfan 错随, I consult Pleco, 2 other books, and a dictionary and delve into the meanings of the words based on the characters. I know it could be a waste of time, but I do enjoy deciphering and checking their origins and why they were used with that meaning. Of course, there are dead ends too. Yeah, I would never say it's a waste of time if you're enjoying yourself. And of course, as long as you're also getting something from it in terms of progress, which you certainly are if you do this. If you spend your time studying, this is what I would say studying is when you're looking at a piece of content or listening to a piece of content, I don't know what that was, and you go and look it up and you see it in example sentences, and you do that, you don't want to do that every time though, generally, because that can really slow you down, and it's not necessary because you'll eventually learn the words you don't understand if you keep pushing through the course. So it's a tough one. I'd say certainly not a waste of time as long as you don't do it every single word that you miss, every single word that you don't understand. Recording my own voice is an invaluable fact checker. That's a great phrase, great way of putting it. I heard myself reading Mama Baba like it was Mama Papa instead of Papa. Warm-up is important, otherwise the recording won't be good. Yes, that's a good idea, especially when shadowing, for sure. I realize I cannot gloss over words when I'm tired vocally, and it will show, like noticing when I do not do the Sandy rules for 你有我想不行. There's no tone send in that last one, but bu does have it turns into a second tone sometimes, and many more. Annie and Jerry's differences come out very clearly, but I find this good training and preparation that there will be differences, but the context and emotional expressions will help me get the message. I also take time to review my movies and see why I missed out a couple of words, and then I edit some of them, especially when the room is not immediately coming out of the story. I tried listening to the podcast while preparing breakfast, but I got distracted in cooking, so I listened to the pod whilst washing dishes instead. If I wake up at an earlier time, I'll review the Anki cards during the day. I read a line or two, write a line or two in chunks of 10 minutes in between hours. But study time is the afternoon before dance exercise, then at night after supper, about 3 hours until I go to bed. So an average of about 4 hours per day. Fantastic, well done. I missed Anki review only once, and that was when I was under the weather. So this is my short feedback. One thing for sure is that I trust in your guidance and tips, so I try not to overdo things. I do not burn the midnight oil. I think the difference with other Mandarin courses online is that MB is a tried and tested, multi-dimensional yet holistic method with lots of technical aids, always with sincere and meaningful support from both Luke and Phil. And most of all, it's working. Yeah, that's the most important. On schedule as well. Thank you, Luke and Phil. Rick. 我明天会学 level 20. Nice. So he's making great progress in the course. Yes, Rick's got he's got good consistency. He's developed a very strong habit there, but at the same time he's got a good attitude. He's not trying to he's not being impatient. Patience is a key. And saying, okay, I'm tired now, I'm going to stop, or I'm just going to do 10 minutes here, 5 minutes here. That's time management. That's another important factor that he's employed in his life, in his daily habits. So I see a bright future for Rick, and lots of progress he's going to see lots more progress if he keeps this up, which I'm sure he will. So well done, Rick. Rick also actually commented in the community, and I thought it's a very interesting one. So let's go through this. In order not to confuse the tones for words not yet in my level, it's level 19, is it wise to start a mini movie, or at least to get the tones right? For example, for the tone of yuan as 公园 and 医院, they're different tones, and maybe these come up earlier in the course, and you haven't learnt the characters yet. That's what we call top-down words, but you still want to sort of make an incomplete movie for them just to make sure they get at least the tone right. I just put my YU actor in the kitchen for yuan, that's second tone, and for yuan, my YU actor is in the backyard, that's fourth tone. The movie is incomplete, but it helps me in remembering the tones. I do not know if it's wise to start doing these incomplete movies at this stage. I have a separate notebook where I put my temporary movies. What is your experience in incomplete movies? I think it's fine to do, but it's unnecessary. That's my thought on it. You're clearly a very, very thorough Rick. You're doing a lot of stuff that you don't really need to do, but you do it because, it does have a positive effect, like I mentioned. It's surely going to have a positive effect, but it's just not always 100% necessary because you'll do it at some point later on. But you enjoy doing it, and it does help you, so that's fine. But in general, I would say sounds fine, but not 100% necessary. That's all I would say. With stuff like this, I never like to say, oh, you shouldn't do that, because I wouldn't do it, because so many times people have come up with new ways of learning using our method that Phil or I wouldn't have thought of or wouldn't have suggested, but it actually works for a lot of people. So yeah, we're both very flexible when it comes to this sort of stuff. I don't want to be too dogmatic about any of this thing. So anyone hearing this, go ahead and try that and let me know. And this is a comment in the MB community, so go ahead and find Rick's message there. It's quite recent, and respond. Let us know what you think. And Bihari on make a movie for ying or ying, depending on the context. Should 400 characters and approximately 700 words, not counting the top-down words we also recognize due to frequency, which is at least another couple hundred. It is so very satisfying how much progress is possible. I echo everyone's expressions of excitement, enthusiasm, and gratitude for the course. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you, Anne. You've been with us for quite a while now, so I'm again really excited to see what's going to happen once you get to the end of foundation, end of intermediate course, and the end of our expansion, which is coming up at some point fairly soon. I say fairly soon, I would say within a year, which is pretty soon relative to how you see it. William Beeman on new vocabulary unlocked for 现在, which means now. He says, hi guys, is there a difference between 肚子很痛 or 肚子很疼? Both 痛 and 疼 seem to indicate pain and hurt, and they sound vaguely similar. Thanks, as always. So I saw this one, and I thought this was a very interesting comparison, like the 疼 and 痛, because it's all about, as I usually say, it's all about seeing it in context and things like that. And based on the context that I've seen these two words in, these two characters and words, I would say that they're pretty much interchangeable. But one is often used more commonly for certain types of pain or certain pain areas. So let me give you a few examples. So 肚子很疼 and 肚子很痛 both are fine. As long as those 疼 and 痛 have an adverb like 很 or 真 or 太 or 非常 or something like that, very or quite or rather in front of them to separate them out, they can both be interchangeable. I think there's also certain areas of China that use them more, like maybe up north they use 疼 more common, things like that. But yeah, essentially interchangeable in that context. But they're also used in compound words, as part of compound words, slightly differently, or quite differently. So 疼, for example, 我疼你, I 疼 you, I pain you, which is short for 我心疼你, I heart pain you, which is a compound fixed word, which literally means there's no real, that's probably an English word that can be the equivalent, but my vocabulary in English is rubbish. But yeah, I feel pain for you, I feel bad for you, 我心疼你. that's like a very common phrase. But if you say 心痛 or 悲痛, it's just sad pain, like tragedy pain. So that's that. There's definitely a difference in the connotation there. And of course, pain, as it's in itself, there's two main words for pain that I know, which is one is 疼痛. Again, fixed compound word. 疼痛. You can never say 痛疼, right? That doesn't mean anything. And of course, you can say 痛苦. 痛苦, which is mainly, again, it's more that, it's pain, but it's often used to describe that sort of emotional pain. And 痛苦, like sad pain, just like I said with 心痛. Whereas 疼痛 is more physical pain. And that's just based on my, just off the top of my head, based on my instinct, based on, reading and listening and stuff like that. I could be slightly wrong on some of these, but I'm pretty sure about them. But yeah, that's basically it. So in terms of that individual context, something 很痛 or something 很疼, 爱疼. 痛, 好痛. It's they're pretty much interchangeable. I will say this though, when my wife was going through labor a few months back, she never said 好疼, 好疼. She never said 疼. She only used 痛. Now that may be because of where she's from. She's up more, she's a northerner, but it could be to do with the severity of the pain. But then again, we had a yuesao that came. Yuesao is a special Chinese thing where they have a lady come and live with you for a month where you 坐月子, like literally, I think sit. Is it 坐 as in sit? I never read the characters for it. But essentially, for a month after giving birth, you're supposed to not do anything, and you have either your family, usually your family if they're around you, your mother-in-law, take care of you, whilst you just lie there and do nothing and recover and feed your baby. That's it. Some people don't wash as well for a month, but I assure you that didn't happen in my house. But also the USL is from the south, and she would always say 痛, when everything was going on, all the recovery and breastfeeding, all that sort of stuff, which is very painful, way more painful than I originally thought. Wow. But as she's saying, 我好痛, 好痛, 好痛, I would say 我心疼你 or 我心疼他. Okay. So again, sorry, I can't be 100% sure on this stuff. Maybe a native Chinese person, but I got the feeling that even native Chinese people would have differing views on this, depending on where they're from, their upbringing, their education level as well. So that's the best I can do. So the next one, I got another one from Rick. He says, 'Can máfan be used to start a sentence asking for a favor? And the answer is yes, but it's usually with the pronoun as well. So you say 麻烦你 blah 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 blah. And then it's just a way of saying, would you mind, as in like, I'm troubling you by asking this. And it's really common. I use it daily, especially when talking to someone that's a bit not so close with you. You don't usually say this, you speak to your friends or family or wife, husband like this. You usually just say it, just go pick that up. Or a more common one is 帮我, like help me, and then the request. If you say 麻烦你, it's a little bit more 疏远. It's a bit more 疏远is like it's a bit more distant, I guess, from them. In terms of relationship. Again, just based on my experience and my input. 帮我 blah 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 and 麻烦你 blah blah blah. And then of course you can add a 一下 on the end. 麻烦你 blah 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 一下. That's just like a really extra. Would you mind please just... it's like it really softens it up a lot if you do that. So it's a good idea to do. And then you add a 谢谢 on the end before they've actually done it. So the most common thing you could say, pick that up for me, please. Right? If you really want to be polite about it, you can say 麻烦你把那个剪一下，谢谢. Right? So it's like three things on... Or 帮我. Or maybe you could say 麻烦你帮我. Yeah, you can even do all four. You say 麻烦你帮我把那个剪一下，谢谢. So that's like all of the... So that's like four super... That'd be like ultra polite. And it wouldn't be weird, actually. just be, oh, that guy's very nice, you know. So that's a way of doing that. Next one is Gary Cheeseman on New Vocabulary Unlocked for 后天. He says, 我们后天见. That's or 咱们. 咱们 is just me and you, just me, the speaker and the person he's speaking to, she's speaking to. 咱们后天见. Let's meet again tomorrow. Day after tomorrow. Or see you. We'll see you. We'll see each other the day after tomorrow. But Gary asks, can it also be used in a metaphorical sense, as in we will see, because he's seeing the character 见 there, which means to see, right? So he's taking that quite literally, and he's saying, can you also use this to mean we will see or find out the day after tomorrow? And the answer is no. But I thought I'd add this comment in just because it's quite a useful phrase. Like, we'll see the day after tomorrow. We'll look at the results. We'll find out the day after tomorrow. It's really simple, actually. One of the most common ways of doing this is just to say, 后天看吧. 后天看吧. That's it. Just can as in like to look. But you would use can for like 看结果, like to look at the results of something, rather than 见. 见 is more literally see, to meet. So I hope that's useful. There's a nice little phrase for you guys. 后天看吧. Or you could say, 明天看吧. Let's see what happens, or let's see the results on tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Another one here. Just another really quick question that, again, I thought it was just cool to share with you guys. Alex Sumray asked on Vocabulary Unlocked for May, which is little sister. He asked, I just wondered if there's a common way to say siblings, say when asking if someone has any siblings. And the answer is yeah. It's the most Chinese word you could ever imagine. And when I say that, I mean logical. You literally, to say siblings, you say 兄弟姐妹. You say literally, which is literally older brother, older sister, little sister. Do you have any of those? Right? But that's a fixed compound word. 兄弟姐妹，你有兄弟姐妹吗？兄弟姐妹. Isn't that just poetry? It's just so logical. It's poetic. Nacho it's a word for 份. 份, as in, I guess you could say portion. He says, so is there any difference between 份 and 块 or 块? 一份 and 一块 or 一块, or both have the same meaning? Well, I can see why you asked that, because if you look in the dictionary, 份 and 块, you're like, why would you get those confused? But you use 份 for like dishes, right? 来一份, 宫保鸡丁, 空泡 chicken or whatever. That's like a dish. Take a dish of that. But then a 块 is like a piece of bread or a piece of meat. So I can get how you might see the same. But no, they're very different in terms of how they're used usually. So I've got a few examples here for you. So 份 is, you can use it for gifts. 一份礼物, newspaper, 报纸, 一份报纸, 一份合同, contract, 一份报告, a report. So when you think of 份, think of like papers sort of stacked together. I'm not sure why they chose that for 礼物 though, because when you think of a 礼物, you think of a box, right? But maybe it wasn't the case. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe because 一份礼物. Maybe it's because money is usually given in China, and so they use 份. I'm just making stuff up. I'm just because thinking stacks of paper. Cash is often a very common present in China. Just give you a 红包, a red packet with some money in it. 一份礼物. Maybe that's why it's 份. Who knows? I don't. But whereas 一块 is a piece or a lump of something. So 一块石头, a rock. 一块蛋糕. You notice I say 块, it's just 一块蛋糕 is fine, but I just prefer 块. I think because not only is it more common, but it's just it really 一块钱. I just tend to hear 块said to mean fast. It's a different character, of course, but 块, saying 块just helps me to separate that out for some reason. 一块蛋糕, 一块肥皂, a piece of soap, a bar of soap rather. 一块肉, a piece of meat. Yeah, it's those measure words can be pesky sometimes, but it just takes, I'm sorry to keep saying this, I know it can get annoying. It just takes, guess what, exposure and practice. It's one of those things that's kind of a lot of the time they make sense. Sometimes they don't quite make sense. You have to really delve into the history of the word and why it's, so for example, 张, 一张纸. 张 is for flat, thin objects, like pieces of paper. 一张纸, or 一张桌子, 一张桌子, for a table, flat. Whereas some of them are sort of come out of left field a little bit. You're like, well, why did they use that measure word for that particular thing? But most of the time, they have pretty standard characteristics. But there's always that Pareto principle, 80% are pretty obvious, and there's like that 20% that just give you the most trouble, give you 80% of the trouble. Again, it's a lifelong skill. You'll get used to it. The next one is from Igor. It says, I don't get the usage of 打 in 打开书, like 打开. Well, it's just part of a resultative complement. It's that type of structure of word where it's a verb result. Like a 长高, like to grow tall. It's a compound word, but it's just, and I know it's weird though, isn't it? Because 打 means to hit. And I could not say why 打开 is used for open, because you also use it for a phone, to turn on a phone, or a switch, 打开. To open a book, as in the sentence here, 打开. It's not very violent whatsoever. There's no hitting involved. So I couldn't really tell you why. It's just something, again, it's more of a rote learning top down. I'm sure there's a reason. There's always a reason why, but I personally don't know. But yeah, it does. I get why you get confused about that. It's like 打开, like I'm hitting open a book. It sounds so violent. But then again, that is a cool bit of imagery to help you memorize the word for open, isn't it? Imagine someone punching a book. Some caveman, like not understanding how a book works, and he just bang, he hits. So yeah, that's you'll come across that every now and then, Igor. It's just something you just got to roll with the punches. The next one here is from Ric. And this one is an example of a very common issue that happens when you're sort of progressing from beginner to intermediate, that sort of level. You can't quite see how the division between words and characters and all this sort of stuff. It's a really common thing. This is about 目的. So 目的 is a goal, or a purpose. And then he came across this word, which is 目的地, 目的地. How are they different in meaning? Well, actually, 目的地 is literally your destination. If you break that down, it makes sense, right? 目的 is your purpose, your goal, and 地 is the ground, which would also be location as well. So your 目的地, your goal location, is your destination. And I can see several reasons why this would have thrown you off. Completely understandable. It's a compound word made up of 3 characters, and they're usually 2 or 4. It's most common. So I can see why that threw you off. But yeah, hearing me say it like that, it becomes much more obvious, doesn't it? 目的地. Now you'll hear that word a lot, by the way, when you're using like a Uber or Didi app. That's what they call it in China, Didi. You'll hear that very 目的地. Or no, actually, I hear it most often in the Uber, the Didi, when I hear the voice of the app like saying, 快到目的地了, or something like that. The next one here is from Jiggy J Diderick on Make a Movie for Liang. He says, would you recommend making a movie for characters you're already familiar with? Now, this, of course, comes up every now and then. People have asked this many times, and it's, again, very understandable. And I always say the same thing, which is, do you really know the character? You want to at least be able to recognize it, know at least one meaning, and pronounce it perfectly. Right tone, right pronunciation, without any effort, or very little effort. Then you really know it. And ideally, this is not a standard I hold myself to, so I'm not going to hold you to it, but ideally be able to write the character without much effort, right? So, but at least the first 2 out of 3. Do you know that? And in which case, yeah, completely skip that character. Just learn the props, any new props that come up, as in the 3D object that we get you to choose. But yeah, apart from that, yeah, sure, just skip them, no problem. Ric Santos on New Vocabulary Unlocked for 每天. He says, I like how Luke explained 记住 as what we have memorized is currently living in our brain. The second part, 记得, somewhat resonates with my depiction of 的 as something that must grab. So 记得, to remember something, as in, I remember now. And yeah, so it's 记得 something. And of course, the different pronunciation of 的 is 得, which means must. So even, of course, the pronunciation is different in the compound word. That doesn't matter if you're trying to learn the word. This is called a mnemonic device, what Rick has done. I don't know if he's aware that he's just made a really good mnemonic. He says, so I understand that 记得 as a memory grabber. And as Luke explains, it brings out what we are trying to remember. Thanks for the explanation. Yeah, and this week, I'm going to focus on making a new video all about creating mnemonics. I'm going to try and make it as high quality as I possibly can. Not missing anything, like how to make word mnemonics and create flashcards in order to learn compound words. Because Phil and I both think that we've had a few people mention that they need more help with this in the course, and I think it's one of our weaker points, so we're going to strengthen that, and I'm going to just once and for all make the ultimate video. Here's how to learn words and how to create all kinds of different mnemonics. And you know, Phil and I used to teach this. We'd spend hours teaching this every week live to people, coming up with associations and connections. So we've got lots of stuff to teach you guys. And another thing, we're also going to add. Again, this is in the pipeline. I'm not sure. Yeah, we've got so many things in the pipeline, but over the next few months, we're going to add intermediate cards for words as well as the characters in the sentences. So that's something I'm looking forward to adding to the course, because lots of people have been requesting that, and we like to listen to requests, especially if they, you know, it's several times within a certain period of time. We'd definitely like to listen to that. By the way, I also started a new category in the MB community called, I can't remember what I called it now, actually off the top of my head, but it's an area where you can, I think it's course ideas, like ways to improve the course or things to add to the course that you'd like. You can add it there. You can go to the MB community and think, I wish it had this. So often you'll probably think of stuff, and it's actually, we do have it, but it's just further down the course, because remember, the course is very, very big. But please, if you think of anything, especially if you're quite far into the curriculum that you want to add, or you think that will make the course way better, let us know. And also, just another aside, I think that we're also going to create at some point soon, again, we've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline, but at some point soon we're going to create an optional Anki deck for vocabulary words for the intermediate and later on the expansion as well. Because we've had a few requests from people, again, we listen to you guys, and that saying they kind of find the word cards, the individual word cards, useful. And even though, of course, there's a lot of extra work, you know, how many words do we have? 4,000 words, 3,500 in the intermediate, you know, so that's a lot of extra cards for you to review. But still, people don't mind. People, especially like people like Rick, who just, they're happy to just put in the extra work as long as it gets them somewhere. So that's in the pipeline too. The next one is Michaela on It's a Word for kwai, which means fast. I kind of mentioned that earlier. For the first sentence, the second fei is the second fei optional, as in fly, because we know the subject is an airplane. So could we say 飞机快要起了? Okay, so the full phrase or the sentence is 飞机, the plane, 快要, very soon, in the near future, 起飞了. 起飞 is a fixed compound word, and it means take off for a plane. And yeah, it's a fixed compound word, so you can't just throw away the fei. And again, this is exactly, you know, Michaela, I mentioned it before. So it happens all the time when you're just getting to grips with the language. You're starting to get the hang of things, but you still haven't fully gotten used to reading. When does one word end and when does one begin? How do I know whether this word is a fixed compound word or is they just going together temporarily? They can have some stuff put in between them. It takes a while to get used to. But yeah, I like these kind of questions. These kinds of questions mean that you're noticing language. You're really thinking about each character, and that's when connections are happening all the time. And even if you get stuff wrong, you're improving because you're taking in the finer details of what you're looking at. So that's great, Michaela. But no, you can't do that, I'm afraid. You have to say the full. You have to say 起飞. That means take off. 起 doesn't mean anything really in this context. The next one is from Paulette on special effects in memory athletics. And this is such a great comment. She says, this really made me laugh. She says, I am almost alarmed at how much fun I'm having with this so far. I think I might put that on the header of our website. That's such a great testimonial, one-line testimonial. I love the imagination and creativity involved, and you're right, I'm not going to forget the image of Sean Connery hurling razor blades in my kitchen. I imagine it ricocheting off the super old 70s green refrigerator my grandmother had, just for fun. Why not? Thank you very much for that, Paulette. Sebastian Lessard on It's a Word for Sure, which means to speak. He says, I'm curious, at what level will we have enough words to begin reading part of your course? Now, I don't know exactly where you are. I don't know off the top of my head, but Sure is pretty early in the course. So once you get to level 21, level 13. Once you get to level 13, that is the beginning of phase 3. And at that point, you've built up definitely 104 characters. And I think that comes with at least 60 to 80 words. I can't remember again off the top of my head, sorry. But a nice handful of characters and words. Now, by that point, what we do is we show you a bunch of sentences that you can now read based on just those 104 characters, which is really, really cool. And that's in level 13, right? You unlock those and you get a bunch of sentence cards. So that's when you start reading is level 13. Now, between level 13 and level 21, the entirety of phase 3, there'll still be a lot of sentences that you'll unlock that you won't know every character for or every word. These are called top-down words. But we still put them in because we don't want you to necessarily only be limited to the characters that you've learned. Not only because it's really hard to come up with example sentences based on such a limited vocabulary, but also you don't want to you want to be able to see stuff that you haven't learned the characters for as well, especially if they're really, really common, because you can get an experience, a feel for them, and then when you go to learn their character, the characters that make those words up, it's just really cool. You unlock them, and they're no longer top-down words. And also, you can sort of learn words top-down without learning their characters. It's just it's more akin to rote learning through exposure. But as long as that's we can't try and keep that to 10% or lower of any sentence that you would see. Because it's just nice to see like that I+1. That's the concept that we're going for there. So it's like your I is your level, the letter I, that's your level, and +1 is one above your level. It keeps a challenge, it keeps you engaged, and the rest of the course is sort of like that as well, or at least phase 4 is like that. So when you get to phase 4 at level 21, you'll start to see not only example sentences, but you'll start to as you see these example sentences, they unlock longer form pieces of content. And by a lot of these pieces of content during phase 4, you only know 90% comprehension. So it's not very much. It sounds like a lot, but actually it's not enough. If you're trying to read a book with 90% comprehension, it would be quite a frustrating experience. But because you only lock these longer form pieces of content after you've seen every sentence in your flashcards several times. And each one of those sentences has a few, or at least one, maybe a few top-down words. So it's you master them individually. It's enough to get the message of each sentence, and you start to get used to these top-down words through exposure. And by the time it unlocks, a lot of top-down words still, but you can understand it. You're used to them. You've been exposed to them quite a lot. And you know what? Once you get to phase 5. You don't just have longer form pieces of content, you unlock paragraphs, and those paragraphs unlock entire stories. And it's the same thing. I should also point out that by the time you get to phase 4, reading individual sentences is no longer really that much of an issue. You very rarely see a sentence where you're like, huh? Or you need loads of time to get used to it. So it's like we like to structure the course like that. So it's like you start to master one thing, so you feel awesome, but we also don't want things to get too easy. So we start throwing in some longer pieces of content. So you're always reaching for that next level, And I think the way we've structured it so far, I think we've at least approximately hit that sweet spot of difficulty. Like a game. If you play a game where if it's too challenging, it's like, forget this. I'm going to get a new one. If it's too easy, like, forget this. This is boring. We want to get into that flow state, sort of in the middle. I'm sure it's not perfect, but I think we've done pretty well with that, based on the feedback that we get from you guys. So there you go, Sebastian. It's a gradation of reading. So you start with individual sentences and phrases, and then by the time you get to level 36, you're reading long form pieces of content pretty well. You're starting to anyway. Yes, you have lots to look forward to. Next is Dom Thompson with a great, really good. This is probably one of the most useful comments we can get as the course creators, because Dom has spent a lot of time with our curriculum and he's made a lot of progress, and this is just very it feels like more of like a report on his progress purely for our research purposes, and also to help other people on the course adjust their expectations and know what they can personally expect depending on how much they invest. So it's so useful for everyone involved. So I really appreciate that, Dom. Please keep this sort of comment coming. So he's on 饺, as in 水饺 or 饺子, which means dumplings. And he says, as an indicator of how quickly I'm going through the course, I just sat down to learn 10 characters and it's taken 40 minutes with minimal distractions. Now, when he says 10 characters, he doesn't mean just I don't think, I'm correct if I'm wrong, Dom, I don't think you mean just the character by themselves. Because by this point, I'm sure you can do a character in 30 seconds, right? Learn a character. When he says 10 characters, he probably means all of the words that are unlocked and all the sentences that comes with that. Okay, so not just learning, because by this level as well, you can sometimes unlock 10 words after learning one character. So that's really impressive speed, what he's doing there. So 10 characters and it's taken 40 minutes with minimal distractions. Sometimes it's a bit quicker if there aren't many new words unlocked. Yes. Sometimes it takes longer if the sentences trip me up. But this feels like a good average indication for this stage in the course. Dom is in the intermediate course by now, I think. It definitely feels like it's getting faster because reading the sentences is much quicker. So this is very much related to Sebastian's question, my big explanation of what of your progress. It definitely feels like it's getting faster because reading the sentences is much quicker. 10 new characters in a day used to feel much more daunting, but now I can manage 20 or even 30 on a weekend day by doing a few of these chunks. Of course, there's still the Anki, which takes up more time, because you have to review everything you learn. So I'm doing about 2 or 2.5 hours a day in total to get through an entire level per week. I'm on track to finish the course in mid-November, the entire course. That's 4,000 words, 1,530 characters, the entirety of the foundation and intermediate. Mid-November, August, September, September, October, November. So about a couple of months from now. Having started pronunciation at the start of February, I invested less time per day before lockdown and stalled for about a month in March, so I reckon 2 hours per day for 9 months is a fair indicator of my progress through the whole course. I haven't done the conversation connectors deck yet and only did the required sentences early on. I'll go back to CC, conversation connectors, when I start speaking more, but I think leaving out the optional sentences was the right call at the time. I thought I'd come back to these, but now they'd be far too simple. Interesting. Now that is such valuable feedback, because I've said this before several times, but we created this course based on our instinct of what it's like to be a learner. And we created everything you see based on, I think this is what I would want if I was at this level. I think, or me and Phil would like brainstorm. When do you think they're ready to read? Oh, I think level 13, it feels right. And our feelings have been fairly accurate. We've been wrong about some stuff, but we fixed. But generally, this kind of feedback, it helps us to make very important tweaks for where to place stuff. And we always take heed of these kinds of suggestions, especially for people like Dom, who have spent so much effort and invested so much time and energy in what we're doing. So that is very, very key. The optional sentences, if they are optional, if you do leave them out, then later on they'd be too simple, and you wouldn't want to. It's almost a waste of time by that point, because by the time you get to Dom's level, you get to the end of you're approaching the end of the intermediate course. Reading individual sentences, whilst we definitely want to keep them in the course, because they're very surgical, they're very efficient. Learn a sentence, review a sentence several times to understand how the word is used. But we want to focus, sort of tweak the focus more to not only more complex sentences, but really longer form content, and start to push you on to, okay, now you're just reading and listening and practicing with a tutor. That's what you're doing. So yeah, very valuable. We'll be discussing that at some point soon. Thanks, Dom. Next is Andreas. He says, for Ji. Oh, okay. So this was in regards to a question. He's like, I think it was Andreas that asked it originally. Yes. He says, why is xin, to mean like trust or believe, like as in 信仰 or 相信? Why is that also letter? Because you can say, 写个信. 我要写给我妈写个信, write a letter. It's like, why are those two the same? And then you look into, Outlier, by the way, big shout out to Outlier. It's a great way of, I wouldn't say it's like, I don't know actually in terms of like learning characters from scratch. I still think the hands and moving method is like the best method out there. But Outlier is just so good. They've just got such great research into every single character, the etymology, the history, the origins of each character, where they came from. Which is just so fascinating if you're into the language, So the Outlier Dictionary, which I think it's like it's a paid add-on for Pleco, but I would highly recommend it if you're into Chinese and it's a lifelong thing for you, or you're not even lifelong, you're definitely going to study it for a few years. Get Outlier Dictionary. It's fascinating. So the Outlier Dictionary in Pleco gives me the following definition: tree for xin. Okay. Definition tree, as in like, family tree. Okay, I get you. So number 1, honesty, to trust, to believe. Number 3, person who delivers letters, as in a trustworthy person. Only used in ancient texts. There's the connection. And 4, a letter, correspondence, message, information. So that, and by the way, that small bit of information is really difficult to find for a native English speaker. Right, so which is what makes their add-on so good. It just saves you so much time. You have no idea how much time that would actually take to look up. Of course, you'd have to have advanced knowledge of Chinese and English in order to delve into that, and then be able to to discern what's true and what's not. So, really appreciate that. So that makes complete sense. Of course, I would only have a person I trust to deliver my letters. Of course. I was just not sure if we'd covered this alternative meaning of the character before. I don't think we did. No, probably not. But we would have an example sentence somewhere in the course for that. But yeah, maybe it's a good idea to list it here in this lesson. It's so awesome how Chinese employs such stringent and precise yet simple structures for its expression, and so efficient as well. In that way, it is definitely the most beautiful constructed language of the ones I have learned, and those are quite a few. Well, thanks for that input. We'll just leave that there on the course. It's going to be great for someone else to discover. Thanks, Andreas, for taking the time. And one more here from Rick in terms of the emails and lessons, comments and messages we've had. On level 35, conversation connector. He says, 我们先到这儿吧. Again, I add the R because it just sounds better for me speaking. I need to feel how the parts work together so I can remember it. Yeah, I can't get a handle on this one. Can you please break it down a little? Yeah, it's all about understanding 先, which Chinese people would often translate into Chinglish when they would say English as first. So, but it's just basically a way of rounding something up. So you'd say, "我先走了." It's not literally, because 先 means first, right? 我先走了. It doesn't mean literally I'm going to leave first before everyone else, haha. But it's kind of that, but it's more like you're rounding things up. You're the one ending this interaction. That's my feeling behind it. But you can also say 先到这儿吧. 先到这儿. It's just a way of softening things up to say you're ending something. I might be wrong about the exact explanation, but that's the feeling I've got from hearing and using it for so many years. So that's why it's thrown you off, because it doesn't literally mean I'm going to first arrive here. But basically, what 我们先到这儿吧, which literally means let's call it a day for now. Let's call it a day for now. Let's stop here. 先到这儿. That's like, I guess you can 先 means let's end this. Yeah, and I'm the one doing it, so I'm going to say 先. You can also say 我先走了. I'm going to end our interaction. I'm going to go. But I'm going to say, if you just say 我走了, that's fine too, but 先走了 is just a bit more polite. That's my feeling of that. So that's how you should think. That's the only two contexts that I can remember it being used in, but hopefully that would help you out there, Rick. All right, next we're going to go through the movies that we've had this week. We had a few come in. The first one is from Robert Carver for Make a Movie for Ting, which means pavilion. It's a prop. It's very obviously fairly rare. It's a rare word, but it's used in the character as a prop, character for Ting, which means stop. So let's see what Robert has to say about this one. Tyra Banks is in the kitchen at the Lake O apartment. That's ENG. With Abraham Lincoln, which would be the sort of the top hat, the sort of roof, the roof, not the roof, sorry, the top hat with the mouth, sort of combined together, furiously fighting off a horde of vampires from the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I haven't seen. Abe wields his harpoon, while Tyra swings a bloody meat hook. There are so many vampires that they are backed up into a pavilion, where after a fierce battle they stand victorious in the middle of the pavilion, and Abe swoops Tyra into a kiss as the camera zooms out and up into the sky, centered on the pavilion with the dead vampires circled around it. Wow, that is probably a better ending than the actual movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I'm harshly judging it based on the name. I'm sure it's very entertaining. But well done, Robert Carver. That was a great scene. And you've used that camera angle at the end, just zooming out with the kiss. I don't think I can improve on that myself. Well done. Next, we have Ramona on Make a Movie for Nan, as in difficult. And she says, my N actor is trying to play on his new beautiful Chinese flower pot drum. His cute green talking parrot keeps repeating, it's difficult, it's difficult. You bet it's difficult to work with somebody who keeps interrupting. Yes, I like, Ramona always puts in like the audio aspect, the let's call it the script, not the script, the lines, the lines, the 台词. And we can assume that there's an obvious sort of physical, because I tend to say I feel like a bit of a broken record, because I'm sure Ramona's doing this in her mind anyway, but she's just not mentioning it in the description. Obviously, you want that idea of Nan shown on his face. He's like trying to play, and it's like he's struggling, and then he gets interrupted by the bird, and he's like, it's hard enough as it is. Can you stop? And he's struggling, and you maybe play that a couple of times. So you've got that Kodak moment. But I'm sure you're doing that anyway. It's a great concept, very simple, and it shows the idea of difficult on a couple of different levels, which is great. Next is from Tyson on Make a Movie for E, which means easy. Since this character is a component in many other characters, I think that it would be good to make a separate prop for it. Maybe a Staples, that was easy button, or a can of easy cheese, or easy E. So Tyson's been like giving suggestions, and most of these, the reason why we didn't create this as a prop here is because it's not useful enough. It is used in a lot of characters, but not within the current course where you are. But so it doesn't make a difference to us because all we were going to do is get you to make a prop for it later when you're about to use it in a bunch of characters. But you can always just do it now if you like. So you can follow Tyson's advice, or you can just wait for our new decks to come out with the new expansion and things like that. Last one here is Evan Hall. Make a movie for qi, which means, we mentioned it earlier, didn't we? It's in qi fei. So it usually means like rise, to rise up, or to start. Kate is in my childhood home in the bedroom. She is moonwalking around a snake eating itself. That would be obviously the snake-like S component. Little did she know that this was an ancient ritual, and the snake began to rise up into the air and float. Oh, so moonwalking. So what you've done there, Evan, you've chosen moonwalking, that action as a prop. We don't usually recommend that because it's, although that's a very memorable action, what you're doing there, and it's probably absolutely fine, for most people, most situations, but every now and then you're like, oh, my actor is moonwalking and I want him or her to be doing something else, but they have to moonwalk because that's the prop. So you're sort of taking up that act, you know what I mean? You're taking up that potential pair of hands. It's easily solved. You can either just bring in a copy of your actor, which we recommend, or an extra to do the other stuff, or you can just change your prop to Michael Jackson moonwalking, or it doesn't even have to be moonwalking. He represents moonwalking, so that would work too. But either way, I like that, except for that little bit. So I would recommend tweaking, perhaps. The actual concept and the scene itself is fantastic. Very simple, rising up in the air and floating, an ancient ritual. Yeah, works for me. So well done, everyone. Thanks a lot for your messages this week. That was really helpful and just inspiring to read some of them. It's great. So keep those coming. And if you've got any issues at all, get in contact with us at contact@mandarinblueprint.com and we'll get you sorted. So thanks very much. I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.